Hi, I'm Tobias Wayland, head writer and editor for the Singular Fortean Society, and I have a story to tell. So this would have taken place in my early 20s. I was 21 at the time and living with my parents temporarily. And so at this point in my life, I had experienced quite a few seemingly paranormal events. And it's important for you to understand that because my reaction to this particular event might seem extremely unusual otherwise. So, on this particular evening, I had gone to bed with nothing unusual having happened that day. And I woke up in the middle of the night. I'm not sure what time it was, but it was definitely still dark. And I noticed something extremely odd. I was floating several feet above my bed, and as you can imagine, I was surprised, to say the least. I wasn't frightened, but I certainly didn't expect when I went to sleep I was going to wake up in this position, and so I woke up and I noticed that I was seemingly floating a few feet above my bed. And I noticed that there was no blanket on me, which was unusual because even now I'm most comfortable when I have a blanket on me, even in the middle of summer. And so I noticed to my left something in the periphery of my vision. So I turned my head. This is important that I was able to turn my head. I wasn't paralyzed. I turned my head and I saw what seemed to be the silhouette of a person standing next to my bed. It really looked like humanoid, but really specifically human-like. It didn't seem unusual. There was no disproportionately large head or anything like that. It really looked like the outline of what you would expect a person to look like standing there, although there were no discernible features. So try to imagine, I didn't sleep with a nightlight or anything. There was no light coming from inside the house. My door was closed to my bedroom, but there was sort of the ambient light that one becomes used to from living in the suburbs. So somewhere between the light that you'll constantly be accosted by in your home when you live in the city, and the total darkness of a rural environment. And so it's usually enough to, once your eyes adjust, be able to make out a few details, and if you're familiar with the room, you can navigate it relatively easily. Anyway, what was unusual was in the ambient light of the suburbs, there was no discernible details for this person. It looked like a sort of living shadow. I was able to make out my weight bench, my dresser, other details in this room, but for whatever reason, there were no discernible features on this person. And so I look over to my left and I see this thing, and the first thing that occurred to me was, I don't think I'm supposed to be awake right now. And almost in response to that, this whoever or whatever reached out its left hand. I can still feel it when I think about it, when I think about this memory. So it reaches out its left hand and it places its hand on my chest almost comfortingly. And when it does that, I'm lowered back down to my bed, and it disappears. And so I lie there for a moment, a few minutes maybe, and sort of think about what happened. And I couldn't really make a lot of sense of it. I mean, nothing had really happened like that to me before. I was used to nighttime visitations, but nothing of, I guess we'll say that level of severity, that impossible, really. And so, I didn't panic. I knew at this point that, going and waking anybody else up in the house wasn't going to do me any good. I learned that lesson pretty early as a child. And so, I lied there and reflected on it briefly, and I went to sleep, or back to sleep. And when I woke up the next day, I thought about what had happened, and it occurred to me that I was on top of my comforter, and the comforter was pulled up almost to my pillow. So even if this had been some sort of dream or hallucination, which I don't think it was, I felt as awake then as I do now. Like, literally, if that was a dream, I might be dreaming right this second. And so it didn't add up for it to be something like a dream or any hallucination, because I can't explain how I got on top of my comforter like that, and then had it pulled up all the way underneath me, unless I had somehow been removed and then set back down. And believe me, I've given this a lot of thought, and it couldn't have been sleep paralysis. I thought about that too. I wasn't scared, although I guess you don't necessarily have to be for sleep paralysis. But more importantly, I wasn't paralyzed. I could move. I turned my head over to look at the thing, and as I did that, I knew I wasn't paralyzed. I knew I could move, but it seemed like a really bad idea to do so, so I chose not to. It seemed like not thrashing around a lot while floating above my bed seemed like the safer move in that moment. And so here we are. I frankly don't know what to make of a lot of the events that happened to me, and continue to occasionally happen. But that was by far one of the most unusual. So thanks for listening to my story.